themselves more properly. So the recording has started. Crispin, please kick it off.
Thanks, Paul, for the opportunity that we have here today to share what we have in our project of Ngong River Riparian planning. Start by allowing Mbugua to introduce himself, and then I'll go forward.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who's joined this call. My name is Amke Mbugua. I am based here in Nairobi, working with the Go Down Art Center. My colleagues, I can see some of my colleagues are here, Rehema Kabare and Mary Owino, as well as Joy Mboya. The Go Down Art Center, very quickly in terms of introduction, is an arts and culture institution that's based in Nairobi. It's been operating for 21 years now, and even though our primary focus is arts and culture, we have over the past 15 years become interested in questions of urban development, community development, and particularly exploring the intersection between culture and cities. And we are very excited to join the River Cities Network and to present our collaboration with AMT and with WIRE. Thank you.
Thanks, Mbugua. I don't know if a WIRE team is around. Esther. Myself, I'm Crispin Nyamora. I work with the Kiba Mashinani Trust as a physical planner, and currently leading the project for Ngong River regeneration. We were working on an action plan to help ensure that the riparian reserve along this section is restored, that the communities, the riverine community, are able to enjoy the services that comes with this section that we term as a riparian area. So without further ado, I think we'll just go ahead and start our presentation, because Mbugua, who is here, and I'm also here, and the rest will join, and we'll give them opportunity also to share, if that's okay with us, Paul.
Of course, yes, totally fine, Crispin. Go ahead, please.
Thanks.
Sorry, I think I was muted. Can you all see my screen?
We can see your screen, yes, it's perfect.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. So, yes, this is the Ngong River Riparian Planning project that is being led by Akiba Mashinani Trust, Women in Real Estate Kenya, and the Go Down Arts Center, together with our partners from the Kenya government, that is the BCRAP, Building Climate Resilience with Urban Poor, the State Department for Housing and Urban Development, the University of Nairobi, as well as the River Cities Network and the International Institute for Asian Studies. So this project, we began this project about 6 months ago in earnest, but we had been exploring this idea of planning the river for about 2 years. I think that's when the Go Down and WIRE, the Go Down and AMT, together with some other colleagues, started looking at planning the river. But before I get into that detail, I will just give you all a background of where Ngong River is, where Nairobi is, and a bit of the history of this city. So, yeah. So this is a history of Nairobi and its rivers. I'm going to be borrowing heavily from a fantastic book that was written or published by the Mazingira Institute, which is an environmental institute based here in Nairobi. And this book was titled The Struggle for Nairobi, was published in 1994, written by or researched by Davinda Lamba, with illustration from Terry Hurst. And he tells a story, as you can see on the bottom right. It's a comic book kind of storytelling of the history of Nairobi. A man and is telling the story of Nairobi to his family. And as you can see, Nairobi's history is intertwined with the history of the colonialism of Kenya and the wider region, and particularly the railway, which was the main instrument that was used to not just colonize this part of the world, but also to establish the city of Nairobi. So this part of Africa, Nairobi is on the eastern side of Africa, and the eastern side facing the Indian Ocean. And the two key geographical features within Nairobi, or rather this eastern side of Africa, are the River Nile and the Great Rift Valley. So as you can see on the map on the right, River Nile starts in Lake Victoria, which is pretty much the center of Africa, somewhere near the equator. And the Rift Valley is to the east of that. And Kenya, the map of Kenya here on the left, you can see that the Rift Valley, which is marked section 1, cuts through Kenya going from north to south. And on the western side is Lake Victoria, and on the eastern side is the Indian Ocean and all the rivers that flow into the Indian Ocean. So Ngong River is one of the rivers that flows into the Indian Ocean, and it's part of the Athi River catchment area. Athi River is one of the 5 main catchment areas within the country. And Athi River, I think, is the second longest river in Kenya. And it flows from the eastern slopes of the Rift Valley, the Rift Valley escarpment, and flows from west to east towards the Indian Ocean. The headwaters of Athi River is actually where the city of Nairobi is located. And as you can see in terms of elevation, it starts from the highlands in the east, which is about 5,700 feet above sea level, and then flows down from those highlands into the Athi Plains, and then makes its way into the Indian Ocean. So Nairobi, the city, is also kind of split in terms of these two environments. You have the highlands on the western side and the plains on the eastern side. So the British Kenya was a British colony, and around 1890s when the British started coming to this part of the country in earnest. The British had established themselves on the Indian Ocean coast sometime in the 19th century, but by the middle of the 1890s, they had determined that they were going to build a railway because they needed to secure the River Nile. Egypt was one of the biggest colonies, or the most important colonies, and they needed to secure the source of the Nile, which was found out to be Lake Victoria. And they said they're going to build a railway to enable that security. The railway basically appropriated a caravan route from basically the 18th century was characterized by a very robust caravan route facilitating trade from the coast, the Indian Ocean coast, to the African hinterland. And that trade was everything from slaves to ivory, going to the coast, and then things like spices and cloth and other stuff coming from the Indian Ocean coast. And as you can see from the various maps here, there were different ethnic groups that had settled in this area. You have the Kikuyu, who are to the north, the Kamba towards the east, and the Maasai in the western and southern parts. And by the time the British were establishing the railway, they said, before we tackle the highlands, we're going to set up a railway depot. And that railway depot, that area was known as Nairobi, which is actually a Maasai name, meaning the place of cool waters. So the city of Nairobi was basically named for its rivers, because there were numerous rivers as part of this Athi River catchment area, lots of streams, and particularly where the highlands met the plains, there was a swampy area. And so that's basically what the first British settlers were found in that area around 1890, between 1890 and 1900. By 1905, the Kenya-Uganda Railway had been completed, and the headquarters had been placed in Nairobi. And by 1910, the headquarters of British East Africa had been moved from Mombasa in the coast up to Nairobi. And so Nairobi became the capital of British East Africa, eventually the capital of Kenya, the Kenya colony. And when Kenya gained independence in 1963, the Nairobi became the capital city of the Republic of Kenya. And up to now, it's still the biggest city, the biggest urban area in East Africa. So aside from, once the British had secured the source of the Nile through the railway, they also decided to settle in the Kenyan highlands. They liked the climate, and they decided they're going to settle. And so by the 1930s, you had a lot of settlers who had come and basically pushed everyone out and created these farmlands, what they called the White Highlands. And so you can see the Kikuyu Reserve to the north, and the map on the left, the Kikuyu Reserve to the north. The area that is not shaded are all the kind of white highlands, or the white farms that were settled, with Nairobi in the center. And in the map on the right, you can see that settlement in the wider context of the country. And all of this was facilitated by the railway. You can see how the main spine of the railway went from south east to northwest, with different branches to facilitate that kind of settlement. So by the 1930s, you can see how much the white settlers, how much land the white settlers occupied and farmed. And in the city, it was a similar story, where the city was a colonial construct. And it was, and during colonial times, the city was organized around a racial hierarchy, with the European settlers at the top, the Indian or Asian settlers who came as part of the railway building, and then later for business, in the middle, and the Africans at the bottom. And the city particularly was not a space for the Africans. The Africans had their reserves. That was where they were meant to call home. But if they came to the city, they were coming there to work. And so, but also because they were at the bottom of the pyramid, there were very few spaces in terms of housing or areas for settlement for the Africans. And so what happened, so that continued throughout the colonial period. And even after independence, whereas the racial hierarchy was dismantled, it was actually replaced with a class hierarchy. And the high income, or the wealthy at the top, the middle income at the middle, and the poor at the bottom. And that is the situation more or less as it is today. And what's interesting is that, as you can see in the map here, this is a map of Nairobi. So many rivers, the small kind of settlements, these maps are talking about uncontrolled development and the growth of informal settlements. And you can see here they are numbered. They're about 46 by 1970. Well, actually by 1990, which is when this map was is referring to. And you can see that they are highly informal, self-built kind of structures, and built along unoccupied lands. So not in the formal planned city of the residential estates or the business districts and things like that, but actually in the unoccupied lands, which more often than not were along the riverbanks and the swampy areas. So by 1990, you can see the difference in population density from in the high income areas. In the center bottom area, it talks about in the high income estates, population density ranges from 300 to 2,000 people per square kilometer. However, if you go to the informal areas, it's very dense. 49,000 for Kibera, 63,000 for Huruma, 55,000, Majengo, Korogosho, 57,000. So the history of Nairobi's rivers is tied a lot to the history of the settlement of the city, the provision of housing or the lack thereof, and particularly the initial racial hierarchy of settlement in the city, but that was replaced now by the kind of class hierarchy of the city. And you can see this map or rather this graphic of population on the bottom right shows that in 1926, the Europeans were less than 10% of the population, Indians were 30%, Africans were 60%. But in terms of available land, Europeans was, more than half. The railway, which was a big institution, had a lot of land. Indians residential had 4.7%. Official African housing was 5%. But as you can see, that official housing was not enough. And so people made now their own arrangements for housing or for settlement. And that's where this idea of slums or informal settlements comes from. So as we are speaking now, 2025, this is a Google Earth image of Nairobi. It's quite zoomed out. I think the point here was to show you the railway, which is in red, and the three main rivers within the Nairobi Rivers Basin, which is part of the wider Athi Rivers Basin. And from the top river is Mathare River, then the middle river is Nairobi River, and the bottom river in the south is Ngong River. And Ngong River and the area we are focusing on is between the two yellow marks you can see there. So Ngong River is about 60 kilometers from the source, which is towards the west in the forest in the west, to where it joins Nairobi River in the east. It's about 60 kilometers, and this riparian planning project is 15 kilometers of those 60 kilometers. So that's a bit of background of the geography and the history of settlement of the city. For us as a coalition or as a consortium, we about 2-3 years ago, we started getting involved in the question of rivers in Nairobi, particularly because the government decided to form in December 2022 then what they're calling the Nairobi Rivers Commission. The commission was formed to consolidate and coordinate all the different efforts by all the different bodies that have happened over the years, which there have been many. And in 2023, the NRC delineated each of the 3 primary rivers into 6 zones. So there are 18 zones in total, from kind of like a catchment zone to the confluence where all 3 meet. And they began a master planning process in 2023. As of today, February 2025, we have not, as stakeholders who have been engaging with Nairobi Rivers Commission, we have not been formally shown the master plan yet. We've just seen and heard snippets of different bits of information. But what was interesting that happened last year is that the NRC identified the Go Down Art Center, Akiba Mashinani Trust, together with 3 other similar organizations, as organizations that have a lot of experience working with communities and also working on urban issues. And they asked us to help them mobilize other non-state actors, particularly NGOs and civil society organizations who are working on river issues, so that we can begin. They can begin the process of mapping what each organization is doing, and begin the process of coordinating all of that work. Now, unfortunately, this was early last year, so February, March last year, we began that work, and by April, we were having the first workshop. That same day of the workshop, April 30th, was when the government announced that because there had been flooding in the country, people who are living within 30 meters of riparian zone of water bodies, be they rivers or lakes, basically riparian zones, to move out of those areas. And because there had been a lot of rain in April and there had been some flooding. So that's what happened between April and July 2024. Flooding, the people who were unable to move or did not move were evicted, and their structures within the 30-meter riparian reserve were demolished. Now, the evictions and demolitions, some people have argued, and people like us, civil society organizations who work a lot with communities, have argued that that process was not done in a just manner because it was discriminatory. Even though there was an emergency for flooding, it still should have been done in a more just process. And these are photos, before and after photos of an area that the government says they have reclaimed. And the reason why we say it was done in an unjust manner is because, as you can see in the photo on the right, the right bank of the river is what we can call formal structures, and the left bank has formal structures, and on the right bank has informal structures, trees, a boundary wall, and some kind of iron sheet structures. Yet the part that was demolished is only the informal side. The formal side was not demolished. So sorry, this is a before and after photo. I hope you can tell, but you can see what was demolished and what was not demolished. So there was it was a discriminatory process, and really a process that did not follow any guidelines that are set in law in terms of processes of eviction. There were no plans that we are aware of that have been followed. So that's one of the reasons why we came together to prepare a riparian action plan. So there have been ongoing planning efforts over the years, and we're just going to talk about a few of the most recent ones, or the ones that are particularly related to this 15-kilometer stretch. The first one, which is at the extreme west, is the railway city. The Nairobi Railway City is a government project situated, trying to regenerate the old railway yards in the center of the city. It was envisioned as part of Nairobi Master Plan, which was done in 2014 to expand the CBD and revitalize the Nairobi Central Station. And that the Nairobi Railway City Master Plan was approved in 2023 by the Nairobi City County. And what's interesting is that there's a tributary of Ngong River that crosses through the Railway City area towards the southwest corner. That tributary is the same one that crosses this proposed Nairobi Cultural District to join Ngong River. And this cultural district is being spearheaded by the Go Down Arts Center to help the city develop either creative economic zone or cultural district. We still haven't finalized a name for it, but the idea is that this is a space for culture, and aside from culture, it will also better connect what is happening to the north, which is the Railway City Development Area, and efforts for planning Ngong River to the south. And I think at this point, I can hand over to my colleagues at AMT to talk about the Mukuru SPA.
Thanks, Mbogwa, for providing a comprehensive background of Nairobi and its rivers, and also sharing on what the Go Down Arts Center has been working in terms of planning for the section of tributary of the Ngong River. Additionally to what Mbogwa has shared, there's a plan that was prepared through the declaration that was done by the Nairobi City County in 2017. The Nairobi City County declared Mukuru, which has 3 informal settlements. That's Mukuru kwa Reuben, Mukuru kwa Njenga, and Mukuru Viwandani, a special planning area. The 3 informal settlements occupies an area of approximately 689 acres, and population as at 2017 was approximately 402,000, with a household of 100,000. And 8 years down the line, if you do a projection of that population, you will find it to be around 550,000. So that means approximately 150,000 people have increased within this area. But the area of this section still remains the same, which means it's the density of that area has increased, and that being an informal settlement, then it also, the pressure on the river also has increased. Additionally, the SPA plan also made proposals for planning of the riparian, 30-meter riparian buffer, though not into details, but it highlights that there was need to do a planning for the riparian. Next, Mbogwa. There's also a situation analysis that was done by a partner organization, that's KDI. They were looking at a concept that it's called the River and the People Plan. This was done in October 2022. And from the situation analysis, it came out that there's a massive earthfill that has altered the river's flow. And the area was also characterized by irregular or almost non-existing riparian zone by then, because people, high population density had led people to put up structures up to the extent of not even leaving a section or a buffer for the river. So the areas had also few pockets, and still the same up to date. You'll realize the vegetation cover is low, as we'll share later on. Additionally, Akiba Machinery Trust, in partnership with the World Resources Institute, did profiling of some of the nature-based solutions that youths are engaging in along the riparian reserve, of which majority of the projects that they were doing were demolished during the demolition that had been highlighted by Mbugua. But we managed to realize that there are much activities that are happening. Some are doing tree planting, some are doing black soldier fly to help reduce the organic waste that comes from the informal settlement areas. This Mbugua. So on to the thanks. On to the rationale for our planning, you realize that the river itself still remains heavily polluted with the untreated raw sewage that comes from both industries and at community level, and unregulated or solid waste disposal. And this has a big impact on not only the riparian area, but also the river itself, because once it floods, these solid waste that are disposed along the riparian reserves find their way into the river and causing blockages. And the pollution also poses risk of ecosystem and public health and reduce water quality in itself. So the action plan and then will help to build on the existing that was demolished. Does not remain vacant, because if it does, then different communities will bring back the structures that are already demolished into this space. And so for us to secure this space, then there's need to do a proper planning, a rigorous planning for the area, and ensure that that area is secure from occupation. So on to the action plan itself now. As Mbugua has highlighted earlier, this section is a 15-kilometer stretch. It spans from Mombasa Road all the way to Kayole-Soweto. And there was a zoning that was done by Nairobi Rivers Commission. So it falls within zone 3, 4, and 5. Additionally, the zone 1 and 2 of Ngong River is being handled by a different organization that's called KDI. So for us to be able to undertake this planning process, then we came up with a methodology by first ensuring that we first form a consortium and then undertake stakeholder mapping and data collection, conduct situation analysis to examine the existing situation of the river as at the time of planning, undertake community consultation meetings just to bring on board the community and ensure that their issues are also captured within the plan. We are also anticipating to hold an in-situ workshop, after which we'll come up with a draft action plan, we'll formulate that, and then validate the plan itself, prepare the final action plan, and then submit the plan for approval. So in terms of formation of the consortia, AMT, as I've highlighted, agreed to work in separate spaces within the Ngong River section. So KDI is working on zone 1 and 2. AMT is working on zone 3, 4, and 5. And so AMT mobilized different organizations and came up with both technical and social working consortia teams. And in technical team, we have AMT itself, we have University of Nairobi, we have BCRAP, which is a government agency, we have the Go Down Art Center, we have Women in Real Estate, and additionally, we also have now the River Cities Network. In the social team, we have MT working closely with Shofco, Reuben Center, and Mukuru Skills. So, into the situation analysis, just to understand the river and the areas where we are going to undertake this riparian plan, we opted to delineate these different zones into segments, just to ensure that we do a detailed plan for every, because different sections of this river have different characteristics. And so for us to ensure that we analyze those characteristics separately, we segregated or delineated the zones, the 3 zones, into different segments. And so for zone 3, sorry, we have segment 1, 2, and 3, and there's an industrial zone, because mostly what you find there are industries. And then for zone 4, we have segments 1, 2, and 3, and then for zone 5, we are yet to delineate the segments. So in terms of existing land use, we mapped out the existing land use post demolition, and realized that the higher percentage of the land use in this section is predominantly industrial, and also there's also informal settlements or residential areas that are informal. The formal ones, the percentage for the formal ones quite low. So in the mapping process, we were able to map out 104 industries for zone 3 within the 90-meter buffer. And also we also did map out the demolition extent for the first section that we're working on, that's zone 3. And from the red mark line that runs parallel to the river, that's the demolition extent. But the light green one is the 30-meter buffer. So you realize that this industrial zone that I was talking about did not experience demolition. Demolition happened mostly on the upper part where we have the informal settlements. Additionally, we also mapped out some of the infrastructures that we were able to pick during our when we were doing a transect walk along this river. We were able to map out some of the infrastructure. We have the bridges that are located in different sections. We also were able to map out the power lines that passes this area, and also the sewer lines that passes this area. And I realized that there's a substation for power that is located in segment 3 of zone 3.
Crispin.
Yes.
Hi, sorry for interrupting. Can you maybe try to wrap it up so we can have some time for the Q&A?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Additionally, we also mapped the effluent points, 65 of them for the first section that we're working in, and 12 effluents from industries, 53 were effluents from the community. So we then analyzed the industries and then categorized them. We have some that are dealing in metal and construction. We have some that are dealing in electronics and lighting. Some are dealing in automotive and machinery, and others are doing food and beverage. And you realize that the waste that comes from these industries, they find their way into the river, and that's a major pollutant in this section. On non-spatial data, We also mapped out the river characteristics in terms of the ways the river flow. We realized that the main vegetation that we will find along this river section is that of sorts of willow. And from the presentation, then we also realized that there are some sections along this river that was canaled. And the canal section runs all through in segment 1 of zone 3, and the other sections are uncanaled. I think I will welcome Esther then to just do a quick presentation of our next steps, and then we'll close it there.
Esther, are you still there? I saw her join.
Oh, hello.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, my apologies. I was muted. I was saying first, I want to apologize for missing the introductions. My name is Esther, and I am representing Women in Real Estate, which is a professional organization of women in the built environment. And our membership is comprised of basically a representative of almost all the professions within the built environment. So we have planners, we have architects, we have landscape architects, civil engineers, and all that. And what we do, our main mission is to advocate for increased participation and involvement of women in the built environment, and which is why we were enjoined in this consortium to really just make sure that the gender aspects of planning is taken care of. So quickly to the presentation on the next steps. So first we have data collection. We have done data for some part of zone 3, but we still need to collect more data for zone 3 and specifically the non-spatial data. And we also need to do data collection for zones 4 and 5, which we haven't done yet. And next, we also need to work on the situational analysis. And for this, we are working on it incrementally, such that once we finish the data collection for a specific segment, we start working on the report as we proceed with the next segment. And then after that, we will have community engagements. And this will be to validate the situational analysis and also to get community input, which will help add value to the situational analysis and finally to the action plan. And so finally, our last action point is the preparation of the action plan. And we plan on having a draft first, which will then be validated, and then we using the comments from the community workshops to beef it up and then prepare it for the final approval. Next slide, please. In terms of the timelines that we are working with, we are currently working on the first situational analysis report for this segment that we've already collected data for in this month. And we are also hoping to conduct a community engagement to validate the situational analysis that is within this month. Then we also, in April, we will start preparing the second draft situational analysis and also do community engagements for zone 4, that is after collecting data for that zone 4. Then in April, May, we will do the pre-planning for the in-situ workshop. Next slide. In June, we plan on having the third draft situational analysis, which will comprise now the zone 3, 4, and 5, and also have the community engagement and consultation meetings to validate and also beef it up. Then in September, we will have the in-situ engagement project, which will be with the River Cities Network. And then after that, we will update the draft plan and also prepare the final plan in preparation for its submission for approval, which we plan on doing that in October. In terms of the data needs, so first we have the literature review, and for that, it's currently ongoing, and on that we are looking at previous planning efforts and also case studies that we can learn from. We are also reviewing the policy and legal frameworks, both at a global scale, a regional scale, and a local scale, which is also an ongoing process. We are also looking at the river characteristics, specifically the width, depth, velocity, and that is ongoing. Infrastructure, as we've seen, we have analyzed some infrastructure in zone 3, but we are yet to do that for the other zones. So that is also an ongoing venture. Environmental data, the same case. It's still an ongoing venture for the zones that we haven't touched on yet, same as land use analysis, socioeconomic culture and livelihoods, topography. Yeah, so that is the data that we are looking at collecting for this exercise, and we are welcome to inputs on maybe more data needs that we need to look at. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very rich presentation. I hope this presentation encourages those that are interested in applying for the In Situ engagement project to do so. The deadline is on the 7th. I'm so sorry, it's very close by, but it's a very interesting project, as you can see. So I hope you feel encouraged to do so and join the project. We do have a question in the chat from Xavier. Is the river perennial or annual, the constant water flow? And I encourage you guys to ask the questions and turn on your videos, your camera, so we can see you and we can connect this way. Yes, anybody? Yes, please.
Yeah, just to answer that question, the 3 rivers within the Nairobi Rivers Basin are permanent rivers. They do fluctuate within the seasons. We have 2 major seasons, rainy seasons, a long rains, which is March, April, May, and a short rain, which is September, October, November. And the water levels fluctuate between, but they are permanent rivers.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions? Yes, Paul?
Thank you so much, Bugwa, Crispin, Esther, and team for a really rich presentation. This is really very informative to understand the history also, and thanks for the historical context, very interesting. And also to learn about your steps, very detailed steps, very impressive. My question is about when the Rivers Commission divided the rivers up into zones, what impact do you think that has in the work that the different organizations are doing at a wider sort of level, right? By dividing rivers into zones, I can imagine it has impacts in terms of fragmentation, etc. So what is your perspective on that? And what can you do to sort of overcome this fragmentation to the best of your ability? I realize you yourselves are sometimes limited by what you can do. I mean, sorry, just as a as a background, we always say rivers are indivisible, right? So we have to approach it as a kind of systemic point of view. So this creates problems, right? This fragmentation. So how to deal with that?
I could go fast before Mbugua say something. I think the logic beyond behind this zoning was to kind of look at, because as I've said, the river itself have different characteristics at different sections. And